so glad this is the first one in the ticket. It's always rough when we only have one to wait for, and it's the eighth one down.
Yeah. I think last time it was, we were what, 5 or 6 or something like that.
That was a while.
We were, me and Colton both. I was helping him. He was the one presenting it. Or he was in the room, and he sat in that back room for 2 hours before we got done with it.
Yeah, I thought about just zooming in, but I didn't really do that unless I had meetings back to back. So since I told your clients for them to show up, so that I need to do the same.
Yeah. Is that a sign-in sheet for everybody?
Anyone who's going to speak has to say hello.
I just wanted to briefly note to everybody in the room, we try to start right on time, but we have one commissioner that is stuck in traffic, and we need her for a quorum, so we will start as soon as possible.
Good morning. Welcome to the July 18th meeting of the Knoxville Historic Zoning Commission. This meeting is broadcast on several TV stations, so please remember to speak clearly and directly into the microphone. We'll now take roll.
Good morning. For the record, the Knox County Historic Zoning Commission has no business and will not meet this month. So for the Knoxville Historic Zoning Commission, Commissioners Blackburn, Eason, Hearns, and Webster have all informed us that they will not be here this morning and are excused. So Commissioner Bradley?
Here.
Commissioner Fox?
Here.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Here.
Commissioner Randazzo,
Here.
Commissioner Tillman.
Here.
That's 5 present, sir.
Thank you. We have a quorum. All right, now we'll do the swearing in of the speakers. If you wish to speak on an item, please stand now and answer with "I do" to the following affirmation. I solemnly affirm that the testimony I'm about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you. You may be seated. We ask that all speakers limit their presentation to 5 minutes. We also ask that speakers give their name and address before speaking. Please sign in at the podium by legibly printing your name and address. Any appeals of the historic zoning decisions may be made to the Chancery Court within 60 days of the date of this meeting. We'll now have the approval of the minutes from last month.
Motion to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a proper second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Now we'll move on to staff reports. Lindsay?
Okay, so the level 1 COAs issued since the last meeting. 1731 Jefferson Avenue, that's the repair and replacement and patches to an existing slate roof, including all of the details. At 800 North 4th Avenue is the removal of a non-historic door and the installation of a new custom 2/3 light wood door with a window pane that reflects the side lights, and repair and replacement in kind to the wood lap siding. At 242 Dedrick Avenue, they will remove an asphalt shingle roof and replace it in kind, repair and replacement in kind to the wood lap siding and window trim, repair to the existing belt course, and including a small section of flashing to be installed at the top of a decorative wood belt course. At 503 Arthur Street, they repaired an existing concrete block foundation, including repair and replacement to the rear porch elements. At 509 East Oklahoma Avenue, they removed an existing rear deck and installed a new rear deck featuring pressure-treated wood and balusters set into the top and bottom rails. And at 417 East Scott Avenue, they repointed the masonry foundation on the front porch and removed and replaced in kind the wood steps.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to our certificate of appropriateness. We'll go to Old North Knoxville, 128 West Glenwood Avenue.
Okay, so this application was postponed in June to provide some revisions to the proposal. So this is a new secondary structure. The garage measures 24 by 24 feet, and the revised proposal shows it to the rear right side of the property, which is the southwest behind the house. The garage features a 6/12 gable roof clad in architectural shingles. They have an exterior of wood lap siding and a double hung fiberglass windows, or double hung wood windows, and a carriage style wood door. And then the scope of work also includes the installation of new windows on the right side basement level of the primary structure, which include 3 light fixed fiberglass windows. So the specifications for this are in your application packet. So the garage is now proposed to be to the rear of the house on the right side of the property. It'll be accessed from a secondary access off Armstrong Avenue instead of the alley. The application notes that they are not using the alley access and due to flooding on the property. And the revised placement of the garage does meet the guidelines. The final site plan in the staff report notes that it does need to meet that corner side setback from Armstrong Avenue. The applicant has provided a revised site plan meeting that corner side setback. The outbuilding, the design guidelines have pretty specific design characteristics for secondary structures. The one element that doesn't meet the design guidelines is a slightly more shallow roof pitch instead of the 12/12 that's specifically referenced in the guidelines. However, the house itself has a roof line less steep than a 12/12. The other materials proposed in these revised drawings and in the materials list meet the guidelines. In terms of the basement level windows, they are compatible in design with the original house. The application references a brick infill on these openings, so they were most likely infilled with brick at some point. Fiberglass windows wouldn't be appropriate within the guidelines as replacement for original wood. However, they may be appropriate for newer windows on minimally visible elevations at grade, particularly where moisture intrusion may affect wood window materials. So staff recommends approval of 6H24HC, subject to the condition that the final site plan meets city engineering standards and requirements of the code.
Thank you. Is the applicant present?
Yes, sir. I'm Ethan Fields with FE Trainer Construction, and I believe that presentation was very accurate with what we had proposed. I just wanted to clarify that the windows on the garage are called out as Ultimate Marvin Wood. But other than that, that was a great description of what we have planned.
Okay, thank you. Is there any input from the neighborhood?
Sean Bolin, 115 East Scott Avenue, representing Old North Knoxville. As far as the windows go on the house, we have no issue with those at all. As far as the garage goes, it complies with most of the guidelines. We do have a couple questions. The first regarding the windows on the proposed garage. Those aren't 1/1. We would just ask that staff recommend final window selection. We ask that staff also approve the final door and garage door selection, as many people get styles confused, and Lindsay knows her stuff. Other than that, I'm thankful that the owners met with me, talked with us, worked with us. The only recommendation we would have is option 2, but we can't enforce that, so anything the owners would like to do, but pretty much everyone wanted option 2, voiced an opinion.
Thank you. Sean, in the last meeting, because this was postponed, you mentioned something about the neighborhood guidelines and the roof pitch.
Yes, as far as roof pitch, that's been a mistake for 20 years within the guidelines. We messed up. We acknowledge it. The roof pitch that they have listed there does mimic the roof pitch on the 4 square of the primary structure. There could be some nuanced changes to it, but we do not think a 12-12 pitch would be appropriate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd just clarify that application not shown on the screen does include material specifications for double-hung windows and a particular garage door product.
Good. Okay, I'll open up the floor for questions or comments from commissioners. Sure.
Could we see that garage door that they proposed?
It's going to take a sec. I have to pull it up on the web. Do you need to see?
Well, we're fine if you approve it, though.
Great.
If there's no questions or discussions, we can entertain a motion. There's not many of us today. Someone's got to do it.
I'll make a motion to approve based on, wait, what is it, staff approval? I make a motion to approve based on staff recommendation.
I second.
There's been a motion and a proper second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next, we will move on to Fort Sanders, 1610 Clinch Avenue.
Okay, this is another case that was postponed from the June 2024 meeting. So as you guys recall, this is the proposed reconstruction of the roof line and the addition of dormers, along with an exterior rehabilitation. The existing hipped roof has a 6.5/12 pitch. The roof pitch has been revised to be an 8/12. There are hipped roof dormers so here are the demolition. This kind of shows the existing elevations in elevation, and then we can move through and look at the proposed. The hipped roof dormers will be 8/12 pitch on the front and rear roof slopes, and then 5/12 pitch on the sides. The dormers will be clad in fiber cement shake siding. The application also includes the installation of new windows in existing fenestrations, repair to the brick, and then the enclosure of several windows on the side and rear elevations in sections that have already been enclosed with siding. Those will match the existing. So overall, the primary scope of work, and I guess the first thing I'll do is clarify, so this is a contributing structure to the historic district and the neighborhood conservation overlay. And I just clarify from the last meeting that National Register eligibility or contributing status is not determined by the HCC, but by the State Preservation Office. And a property's National Register status, including contributing versus non-contributing, is not reevaluated by the SHPO unless there's a precipitating event, like a project with federal funding or federal licensing requiring Section 106 review purview. And the SHPO was actually on the call during our last meeting and made the clarification that that's not really an element that's in the Historic Zoning Commission's purview. The overall, in terms of the project, the scope of work aims to increase the height and interior capacity of that upper level. The revised addition changes the roof pitch from 6.5 to 8.5. It was previously proposed as, 6.5 to 8 over 12. It was previously proposed as 9. Overall, the 8 over 12 pitch roof is comparable to the adjacent houses, including 1616 and 1620 Clinch. It is slightly reduced from the previous proposal. Dormer additions have been approved in Fort Sanders, both by increasing the size of existing dormers and adding new, along with slight increases to the roof pitch. The revised drawings show that the largest new dormers will be located on the side and rear roof slopes. On the screen right now is the roof slope. And you can see this revised dormer extends out from that primary roof line and includes an 8 over 12 pitch. So the commission should discuss the design and scale of the rear dormer. Overall, the exterior modifications are within the design guidelines. The application has revised the proposal from last month to show double-hung windows instead of picture windows on the facade. And then the same staff findings apply from the last month related to parking. The guidelines do recommend that parking avoid the front yard. However, final site plans may be necessary based on accessible parking requirements and city engineering standards, and staff may approve minor revisions to site plans provided they meet the guidelines. So pending additional discussion from the HCC on that proposed rear dormer design, staff recommends approval of 6E24HZ, subject to the conditions that all masonry repair and repointing follow the Park Service specifications, and the final site plan should meet plans review and inspections and engineering standards, avoiding creating new front yard parking unless infeasible due to accessibility requirements.
Thank you, Lindsay. Is there any input from the neighborhood?
I did not receive updated input.
Okay. Does the commission feel the need for a refresher on the input from last time, or is that even relevant? Okay, never mind. She doesn't have it.
I don't have it in front of me.
Okay. Is the applicant present?
Brian Dennison, Goss Design Development, 110 West Summit. The revised is still trying to maintain some sort of level of comfortability in the underneath the dorm, the roof itself, and then also taking into account comments from previous meetings. The only addition of a dormer is in the back, and that's to accommodate 2 bedrooms. But overall, I mean, like you said, it's maintaining the scale and pitches of the adjacent buildings. And other than that, I mean, the exterior is pretty much the same on the front, maintaining pretty much the street level presence of the building, other than the revised pitch.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from commissioners?
I guess I was wondering, like, just considering what the staff recommendations were, if you go through each one, whether that's something you all have any concern about or you can abide by. That's what I was wondering.
Is that a question for commissioners or the applicant?
The applicant.
Okay.
So what she was asking is, do you have comments based on the staff recommendation, any of those elements?
I mean, we'll do what we can to maintain like masonry repair and repointing. And then the final site plan, we're trying to reconcile some of the parking in the front, trying to relocate them to be further back. And most of it that was driven by ADA. We were trying to provide more than what was actually required by the zoning. So we're reducing that, maintaining a lot of the street presence from the sidewalk to the front of the house. So we're trying to accommodate some of those other comments from the staff.
Do any other commissioners have any thoughts on the change in the roof pitch? If there are no further comments or questions, we can have a motion.
I move that we approve based on staff recommendation.
There's been a motion and a proper second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. All right, we're moving next door, 1616 Clinch Avenue.
Okay, so this is a similar project that was also postponed from the June meeting. And we can see the existing conditions of this house here. So the existing hipped roof has a 10/12 pitch, and the roof will be reconstructed also with a 10/12 pitch. Hipped roof massing over the original section of the house, and there will now be sort of a hipped roof dormer projecting to the rear roof slope. So we can see the existing and in these demolition elevations here. And then the proposed from the front, and then from the rear and from the sides. And so if you can recall from the previous meeting, the proposal for the roof reconstruction was one large roof massing that would extend towards the rear. And so the revised application has introduced a rear-facing dormer element to break up that large roofline massing overall. And there is also an addition to the house's, the right and rear elevation second story, so you can see that called out in the dashed lines here. The existing building footprint will be enclosed with this revised roof line and lap siding. Overall, the addition will increase the building's height by approximately 11 inches. The reconstructed roof pitch will remain the same, and the drawings indicate the retention of the roof line details. The front again, dormer additions have been approved in Fort Sanders, especially ones that are proportionate to the existing. The front dormer will be larger in width than the original. The side elevation dormers are larger in scale, and then there's a new rear one. The addition to the second story is proposed for a rear and side corner of the house that currently has a one-story low-slope roof addition. So this house has received significant modifications. That's this section here on the screen. The addition doesn't expand the building's footprint, and it will incorporate materials in a roof line compatible with the original house. And again, that roof line has been revised from the previous submission from a single large massing into a lower hipped roof dormer projecting towards the rear. Overall, the exterior elevation has been highly modified, including windows of varying size on the secondary elevations, the enclosure of this basement level, and then non-historic additions to the side and the rear. Most of the windows are proposed to be enclosed, or it's on secondary elevations. They're not character-defining features. And then on the facade, the proposed window and door modifications relate to non-original elements and will create a more symmetrical facade. The same parking findings apply here from the previous case. So pending additional discussion by the HCC on the scale of the proposed dormers, staff recommends approval of 6F24HC subject to the conditions that the reconstructed roof retain the eave overhangs and the decorative corbel detail, and the final site plan meet plans review and inspections and engineering standards, avoiding creating new front yard parking unless infeasible due to accessibility requirements.
Thank you. Was there new neighborhood input from this one?
No.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments from the applicant?
I think overall, the design and the scope of the project is going to bring a little more homogeneity to the streetscape. Took into account the comment of the larger addition, so kind of broke down that mass to maintain some sort of semblance of the previous historic roof structure. So kind of broke it down a little bit and also try to define where the addition was, just kind of materialistically kind of set that apart. But otherwise, I think it's a good description. Again, parking, we're going to try and pull what's shown on the site plan to the rear of the building to maintain that streetscape. And then, like I said, just try to organize the building because of all the modifications that have happened to bring some sort of structured, presence to the building. That's it.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the board? If not, we can entertain a motion.
I move that we approve based on staff recommendation.
Seconded.
We have a motion and a proper second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Good luck on your project.
Thank you.
And I'll give you a chance to speak when I introduce this next one. Next, we're moving on to Edgewood Park City with 1635 Jefferson Avenue. If you want to
Okay.
start with staff report.
So this is the after-the-fact review of a roof replacement. So the house had an asphalt shingle roof that was replaced with a 5V ribbed metal panel roof with exposed fasteners. The roof replacement was completed by February 2024 without permits. So this house is a contributing resource to the overlay. As I said, the request for review is after the fact. The roof was installed without permits or a COA. Both the adopted and the approved set of design guidelines for Edgewood Park City encourage duplicating original materials as much as possible. Related to metal roof products, the older design guidelines recommend standing seam metal or metal shingle roof coverings as replications of original materials. The new guidelines note that corrugated, 5V groove, or wide sheet metal products are not appropriate replacement materials. Standing seam is a different type of metal product that features flat vertical panels that are joined with concealed fasteners in an interlocking seam. These ribbed metal roofing panels that are typically called 5V to describe the profile of the panels are a contemporary design. They're secured with fasteners and screws to the roof decking, which are typically left exposed. So staff's recommending denial of the 5V metal roof product, which does not meet the guidelines, and staff recommends approval of the roof replacement with architectural asphalt shingles or standing seam metal roof.
Thank you. Is the applicant here?
Hi, my name is Austin McLaughlin, and I live at 1635 Jefferson Avenue. And first and foremost, thank you guys for the work that you do. I'll try to be brief. I typed this up and didn't expect to be here. Living in Park Ridge is one of the greatest gifts that we have. Lisa Randazzo lives a couple houses down. Our kids are friends. We love the neighborhood. And I'll admit, looking back, I made mistakes. I talked to the contractor, Lightspeed Construction, who's here as well. And the contractor that I talked to mentioned that, yes, metal roofs are allowed. We looked around the neighborhood and said, yes, we would like to change from an asphalt to metal. He recommended that a permit was not necessary. And so I should have done more due diligence to ask more questions to see what that was. I remember reading in the historic guidelines when I moved in late 2017 that metal roofs were allowed. And so our decision to move from asphalt to metal was a couple fold. Anytime I would get on my roof to replace or to try to repair it, or we had lots of leaks, so trying to fix those things, I would also notice granules that were coming off of the asphalt shingles that were then going into our garden, into the neighborhood. So there were a couple reasons. We wanted longevity. We wanted to be good stewards of the house. And so we thought there was precedent to move to metal. We thought there was precedent to move away from the asphalt again. But the reality here is I could have done more, and I regret that. As I reread the current historic guidelines for Edgewood Park City, found on the website, the first sentence on page 14 reads, "The houses in Edgewood Park City Historic District may have been roofed with slate, tile, wood shingles, metal, or with asphalt shingles. The modern building materials that are available may limit a property owner's access to roofing materials." The following page does have further recommendations. As a pedestrian, it's hard for me to understand without doing more research to figure out what is the difference between standing seam and the product that we put on. What I ask for is grace. We did our best. We tried to take due diligence, and I'll invite my contractors from Lightspeed up to further talk through this, but thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Billy Price. I'm with Lightspeed Construction. We are at 1532 Washington Avenue. If you'll note, we're not only here as contractors, we're also a part of Park Ridge. So the materials in question are misidentified in our inspection report. It's identified as 5V. That is not 5E roofing. 5E roofing is a material that's typically used on barns or sheds that has distinct two, then a space, then a one V channel, then a space, then another two channels. I did bring a piece of classic rib, the same material, but since we have the photo, I don't think it's necessary to put it up. Classic rib was created as an alternative to standing seam in the mid-19th century or 20th century because standing seam is not affordable to everyone. There are several elements within the guidelines I'd like to speak to. First is the material misidentification. That's not 5E. We'd like you to reconsider the inspection report based on that alone. Second, there's precedent in the historic district, specifically within this zoning overlay for the material we used. We surveyed a area between Woodbine and Spruce, which is a 4-block area that overlays Jefferson. We found 7 houses that are using this same material. 2 of the houses are using this exact same color. So there are no houses within that survey that are using standing seam. We did find about 20 plus roofs that are using shingles that are currently in horrible repair, that have leaks that are coming in that are probably creating structural conditions. This homeowner went above and beyond to try to protect the home for a long time. In addition to color specifications, we just asked that be set aside entirely because the current guidelines say colors are not mandated. They're merely recommendations. We use a neutral color that is neither light nor dark. The permissible materials say that slate, tile, shingle, or metal roofing materials are acceptable. That is specific to the way the guidelines are written. Standing seam is offered as one acceptable possible alternative. The guidelines further state that if original materials can be sourced, we should do that. If the expense is unreachable by the homeowner or is just extravagant, then a suitable replacement or alternative material should be found. Classic rib is exactly that. The guidelines state that if any materials are put onto a house that are not historic, they should be reversible in the future. Classic rib is reversible, and it's much easier to reverse than standing seam, and it's much less destructive to reverse it than shingle. The homeowner is experiencing several issues with leaks that were popping up intermittently all over the house, indicating that a shingle roof probably would not have solved their problem. So we would submit that we worked within the guidelines to create the roof that was acceptable. The homeowner is happy with the roof, not just accepting it. They're happy with it. It's what they wanted. Other people within the neighborhood have complimented us on the roof. They've also complimented the homeowner. I have the specific addresses of the houses that we surveyed if the committee wants those. Otherwise, I'll just assume that I've said enough and entertain any questions you might have.
Thank you.
Did you want to?
Why did you believe that a permit was not required for a re-roof?
Permits are written in a very confusing way within the permitting guidelines. It's written with a double negative inside of the statement. Permits are not required for roofs with the exception of, and then it goes on to state some things that are structural changes. Changing a roof material overlay is not a structural change.
As they're talking, it sounds like, I know the applicant has been in that home since 2017, December, and it sounds like you said you actually live in the same neighborhood.
I lived there for 4 years, 2 houses from them. I moved out about 5 years ago. I would love to move back.
Okay.
Best neighborhood in the world.
And it sounds like the applicant said he knew Ms. Randazzo, who is a member of this commission.
Yes.
And if their kids are friends, I think he knew that she was on the commission.
She's also a customer of ours.
So I guess it's really confusing to me that he did not think to ask her or just check, seeing that you are in the Edgewood neighborhood, about the Historic Commission and about applying through the normal application process of which she takes a part in every single month of her life. So that's kind of perplexing to me. And then as other people ask you questions, you said it wasn't a 5V metal roof. What kind of roof did you say it was?
Classic rib.
A classic rib, okay.
I'd like to ask Plans Review to respond to the comment by the applicant about the permit process, if y'all could speak to that.
So a permit is required for a roof. Any further discussion about permitting or building requirements for residential buildings, I'll refer to James Tente, Chief Building Inspector.
Okay, I think that's sufficient.
Were there comments from the neighborhood rep?
So David Nix from the neighborhood said that they are in support of staff recommendation, and they also they requested clarification from plans review and inspections when a permit is required.
So I should disclose that I am friends with the applicant. I've also used Lightspeed Construction for a roof in the neighborhood. I did experience issues with the permit on that roof as well. And from other neighbors, I've heard that it feels unclear whether it is or it's not. It's not what I do professionally, but there does seem to be confusion in the historic neighborhood when we need a permit to do repair work on a roof. I did talk with David Nix, even though he's not here today. He had questions about a roof 5 doors down from the applicants. It's the same color. It's the same material. It was owned by David Anderson, who was the neighborhood president for over 8 years. And he also served on Knox Heritage's board and worked with Knox Heritage at the time to find a suitable replacement roof. And he cited historical precedent for metal roofs. He actually had a metal roof under his asphalt roof. And I'm bringing this house up because it's very similar to this home and on the same block. But he said in the conversation 18 years ago of putting that roof on their home, they discussed how the historical metal materials that were present 50 years prior were no longer available to us. And our current guidelines leave a lot of room for discretion when talking about metal. However, our new guidelines that have not yet been approved they provide that clarity, and I feel like this house was caught in the middle between the unclear guidelines and the guidelines that should hopefully prevent this from happening in the future.
It's caught in the middle, but it's not, the rules haven't been adopted, so they're not under the new guidelines at the same time.
So to clarify my comment, the current guidelines that are approved just say that metal roofs are approved and it names standing seam metal. However, the new guidelines go a step further and they say that corrugated, 5-groove, or wide sheet metal is not appropriate. And we've had this conversation in the neighborhood for a while now because it hasn't been clear. Yeah, I wish that this could have gone through a different process though from the beginning.
In hindsight, permitting would have been an amazing way to go. I'm happy to have that clarity now. We're just, we're kind of throwing ourselves on the mercy of this committee and saying, hey, we're sorry that we did mess up on the permit, but we did try to reach, congruence with the Historic Zoning Commission's wants. We looked at precedent within the neighborhood, we looked at colors within the neighborhood, and we looked at both sets of guidelines. And there are only 2 roofing materials that are ruled out according to the guidelines. Those are fiberglass, corrugated fiberglass, or corrugated metal. 5V is not even ruled out.
The examples that you cited, are those within the historic overlay?
Yes.
And do they have a proper certificate of appropriateness, or are they pre-existing non-conforming?
I don't know. I went down the street looking at other homes that looked like the same roof. I did a general lay. And these homes are not just within the same historic overlay. They are on the same street within 4 blocks of the same house on both sides of the house. They're houses with the same roofing materials.
Challenging to refer to a survey of the neighborhood, but in particular because the overlay, the historic zoning overlay in Edgewood Park City is significantly smaller than the National Register District. So the streets that he referenced, Woodbine and Spruce, are not in the overlay. They're significantly west and east. Also, some other roofs may have been installed without permits and COAs as well.
Yeah, 4 blocks can get you a long way out of a historic overlay.
As a point of order, those streets are 1 block to the left of this person and 3 blocks to the right of this person. So this person is in the middle of those streets. They have brown signs. They say historic zoned. So to any lay person, they appear to be in the same historic zone.
Can you repeat that last part?
To any layperson or even a contractor, they appear to be within the same historic zone. And it's worth adding, the contractor that told Mr. McLaughlin he didn't need a permit is no longer with us.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I think that's one of the big discrepancies here is layperson. If I hear that a homeowner bought a house in 2017, reviewed the guidelines, and saw metal, I think that's sufficient knowledge and due diligence for the average homeowner. It's a difficult process to buy a home as it is, especially in a historic neighborhood, and that's why homeowners rely on contractors, architects, engineers, and neighborhood leaders for specific guidance. And I think that's where the failing is here.
yes, Mr. Tillman, that's why we went to the historic zoning guidelines and made sure our roof fell within that. So,
Okay.
and then we check specifically, the materials are not just similar to the material we use. The materials are the materials that we used.
And if I can back up a little bit, what is the visibility of this roof? There's no site plan here. I didn't get a chance to drive by. Is this a front porch, a back porch?
It's the whole roof.
The whole roof,
Yes,
okay.
sir.
I do want to address your question about why I did not ask Lisa. To be totally frank, I didn't think about it because our roof was entering a time when the rainy season was coming and it was leaking again, and I just wanted to get it done and get it fixed. So again, I could have done more due diligence. I could have asked Lisa. I didn't realize that she sat on the commission. We don't often talk about the neighborhood. We're talking more about our kids and what's going on with school and how to raise them well. So I should have done that. I'm sorry.
I will say I keep my role on the commission a secret from my neighbors.
We didn't know it until this morning, actually, and you are our customer, and we had the issue, so.
Yeah, but it is public information. You can just Google her name and it comes up.
I don't always think to do about that when we're estimating projects, but I understand, Ms. Mitchell.
So we have two representatives for the application here. Is it your sole application to leave existing? Do you have any alternatives?
We want you to approve existing because it matches the guidelines, it meets the historic zoning requirements, and it has precedent in the neighborhood.
Okay. Has the homeowner paid in full for this roof?
Yes, they have.
Okay.
Yes, they have. I would add, we're not a large company. We're not one of your giant contractors, but we'll do whatever we can to stand behind the homeowner.
Okay. Any other comments from the commission? Questions?
Did she say, what was the comment from the neighborhood?
They supported the staff recommendation.
Yeah, and I will say that just going on KGIS and doing the historic overlay map, it's pretty clear what is within the historic overlay versus not, and Woodbine is clearly not.
Did I say Woodbine? I'm sorry. I said the wrong street, not Woodbine. The street that runs from Magnolia to Jefferson, Winona. My apologies, point of order, I said the wrong street, between Winona and Spruce.
In general, surveys of neighborhoods isn't always the best practice for appropriateness, but when it is, we like to see specific examples, photos, things like that. Again, it's not the best way. The best way is to read the guidelines. Houses are different styles. They're built at different times. It's not always the best resource.
I have the addresses if you would like them, but I don't know if that'll help. I have the addresses for the houses that have the same type of roof,
Okay.
should you need them.
It appears to me like the real issue with this roof are the exposed fasteners. And when I think of what the intent was in the guidelines, it's one, aesthetics, not having to see the fasteners, and then two, durability of the product, making sure that there's not leaks. Anytime you put a hole in something, there's potential that it would leak. I'm not sure how valid those concerns are in this situation. From the street, you can't see the fasteners. The same way, it's hard for us to tell in the neighborhood who has the, if it's not 5E roofing, I'm not sure what it's called, but the difference between the standing seam and the other type of metal roof is hard to tell from the street.
And I would point out there are no standing seam roofs within that surveyed area, none whatsoever. All of the metal roofs are classic rib, so. I understand we're asking for grace from the committee. I understand that because we did mess up on the permit, but we learned after the effect because of it's written confusing. So.
Does anyone have a motion?
No, I had another question for Lindsay.
Sure.
Just looking at the guidelines, when it talks about metal roofs, is number 4 all we have on that?
Yeah, I think the property owner referenced the introduction section of the design guidelines, which does just say metal in general. And then the applicable guideline for number 4 just says asphalt or fiberglass shingles can be appropriate, as are slate and standing seam metal or metal/wood shingle roof coverings.
As a point of order, the guideline says metal, and then later says that it is a suggestion, not a requirement.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Can you please not interrupt staff?
As you wish, sir.
Okay. Can you repeat what you're saying?
No, I just repeated the design guideline that's in the, and that was it.
Okay. Typically, a point of order is made by a commissioner in regards to rules, not by
I did
the witness.
think she was finished. I'm sorry.
all
I wasn't
right.
trying to interrupt.
And you may be seated. The commission is deliberating.
Thank you, sir.
I'm not making a motion, but I feel like,
Turn your microphone on.
I'm not proposing a motion, but I feel like maybe we should consider a postponement because a decision regarding this, I think, would affect the guidelines, or I think would necessitate a change to the guidelines, which is not necessarily in our purview to just make a decision today about that. But perhaps I'm wrong.
Are you referring to a clarification of materials?
I mean, our job is to basically enforce our interpretation of the guidelines. The guidelines doesn't really allow for grace, unfortunately. And so if we were to decide that the guidelines were not sufficiently describing what should be allowed, if we feel that this material is appropriate in that type of historic overlay, then wouldn't that necessitate a change within the guidelines, or would it just establish precedents and a case-by-case basis? I'm just curious.
I don't think that the materials that were used were appropriate, but if you read the old/current guidelines that we're legally held to, it's unclear, and there's room for misunderstanding them, versus the new guidelines, if and when they should be approved by city council, should prevent this from happening.
And I think in diving in the minutia of materials, again, which I leave to the experts, not necessarily to homeowners, we're not clarifying whether 3-tap shingles versus architectural shingles are allowed. The same way we're not diving into different types of metal, but we can see how close related 5V and this wide rib panel are. We can see that they're not a shingle, a metal shingle. We can see they're not standing seam.
I would not consider this an equivalent of standing seam.
But you would consider an equivalent to 5V though, wouldn't you? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I could see the deliberation in all of our minds because we're considering grace as an aspect of historic zoning when it's not in the guidelines, which is rather unfortunate.
Does our law department have any suggestions? Is there any way to not approve and approve at the same time legally?
Jury
To
nullification.
say that we are not giving future precedent for this to be allowed, but this is like a one-off fluke thing?
I'm not really sure how you can do that if there's not some kind of a special circumstance.
Can it be indefinitely postponed?
I suppose it could be tabled, and then picked up at a later date, uncertain. That's not something that we typically do with the Historic Zoning Commission. Typically, we do postponement of 30 or 60 days, whatever the applicant feels is appropriate to make revisions or, address the project in light of the commission's sentiments. But it could be definitely postponed for longer than what is typical.
We do evaluate projects on a case-by-case basis, so.
Okay.
Will they have to go forward with the city to get a proper permit after the fact for this? And would the lack of a certificate of appropriateness impede that process?
Yes, they would need a permit for this, and for the zoning purposes, typically zoning doesn't look at re-roofs, but this project may require a COA.
In 2017, Mayor O'Hara indefinitely tabled our updates to the guidelines, and I find that.
Expansion.
Well, it was the expansion and the guidelines at the same time, so it might have been collateral damage, but I think it's ironic that that was tabled, and I feel we are still dealing with the results of that today.
And as a insight for the applicants, the times that we spend the most on applications and struggle the most, they're always after the fact reviews. This is typical. I would, if no one else has any further discussion, I would like to make a motion to postpone and see if the applicant has any alternatives that we can all agree on. That may be a long shot, but I think it's worth attempting. We can sit here and hash out different materials and look at examples, but I think it's hard to design a building that fits historic zoning in a committee. Really, we want a thumbs up or thumbs down what you present. And looking at our comments here, it doesn't seem like this is something we would approve, just my guess. So
I think it would be very helpful to hear neighborhood discussion, and I think that our committee could put more weight on that with the current situation of our guidelines. So at large, at a neighborhood meeting, if people were to say, we really don't like this, but we agree that we're okay with this at this time, that could give us grounds.
Yes, I think in my neighborhood in Old North, we have specifically voted as a neighborhood organization in favor as a recommendation to this board, and the board has heard those. But with that, I'll make a motion to postpone this application.
I second.
There's a
Postpone
motion,
for how long?
Right.
1 month,
Yeah.
or whenever they submit a new application.
I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Bradley?
Aye.
Commissioner Fox?
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Yes.
Commissioner Randazzo?
Aye.
Commissioner Tillman?
Yes.
It's unanimous.
All right, motion passes, and we move on to Mechanicsville for 1321 Dora Street.
Okay. So this is the reconstruction of an existing rear addition. So you can see the existing here and the proposed here. The addition measures 6 feet deep by 22 feet wide, and it has a low slope shed roof, T111 plywood siding, 3 vinyl double hung windows. It's kind of a series of combined additions there. And the proposed addition will replicate the same footprint and roof pitch. It'll have an asphalt shingle roof and an exterior clad in fiber cement shingle siding that's intended to simulate the asbestos siding on the primary house. So some of the comments: overall removal and reconstruction of that deteriorating non-historic rear addition is appropriate. The footprint won't be modified. The addition is compatible with the primary house in mass and scale. The floor plan shows only 1 window, which will be retained, while the renderings do show 3 windows. I can pull those renderings up. Retaining that existing double hung window is appropriate within the guidelines if they want. The applicant should clarify the rear elevation window placement, and then any new windows installed should meet the guidelines and submitted to staff for approval. If this existing door is not retained, any new doors should also be submitted to staff for approval. In terms of the siding elements, the guidelines state that synthetic siding is inappropriate as replacement siding on existing buildings. Replacement siding must duplicate the original. And then the guidelines also state if artificial siding is present and has to be removed to repair the building structurally, it can be replaced if no more than 25% of the siding is removed. If more than 25% is removed, it can't be replaced. The siding will be replaced for structural purposes as the entire structure of the rear elevation is going to be reconstructed. You can see the sagging in the roof elevation there. The siding proposed for replacement includes that rear elevation and then small sections of the side. The primary house is clad in asbestos shingle siding, which is not proposed for replacement at this time. The existing addition is clad in the plywood siding and asbestos shingles, which don't meet the design guidelines. Recognizing the minor scope of the repairs and the lack of original siding on the building, the installation of a small section of fiber cement siding to match the asbestos shingles won't further detract from the house's integrity, and then replacement of the asbestos shingle siding would require further review by the Historic Zoning Commission and need to meet the design guidelines, which call for wood. So staff's recommending approval of 7D24HZ subject to the conditions that the applicant provide clarification on any rear elevation elements with any new windows or doors to be submitted to staff for approval.
Thank you, Lindsay. And before we hear from the applicant, I would like to disclose that the applicants are close personal friends of mine, though I have no monetary or employment interest in the outcome. And with that, I'll welcome either Joel or Carly up to speak. Or both.
Good morning. I'm Joel Brogan. I'm a co-owner of 1321 Dora Street, and I also live in the old Mechanicsville neighborhood. I have no real notes on what was presented here. This all sounds correct. As far as the repairs go, what we're attempting to do is save the house from further damage. It's incurred years, if not decades, of water intrusion damage, and we want to prevent that from further damaging the house and save it from completely melting in the case of water intrusion. The two windows in the back that require clarification, I believe that was perhaps an oversight on our application. Those two windows we plan to reuse in the repair. The reason why we had explicitly pointed out the window on the far right of this image here is is due to its historic nature. It is one of the original double hung windows in the house. So we wanted to ensure that we were clear that that window was being saved and would be used and in the repair of the back of the house. And I'm happy to answer any other questions also.
Thank you. Is there any input from the neighborhood?
Yeah, so Carly Herod, one of the property owners, does typically represent the neighborhood. So I have a written comment from the neighborhood board. They are supportive of the staff recommendation and wanted to clarify if you are curious as to the determination regarding the fiber cement siding that simulates the existing asbestos siding. They concluded it is appropriate for several reasons. Retaining the conformity of the asbestos siding for the entire house would look better than replacement with wood siding on just the rear addition. The replacement material is in the rear and difficult to see from the right-of-way. The material is durable and has a long lifespan compared to other synthetic materials such as vinyl siding, and the proposed material will match the design of the entire house and retain a type that showcases an improvement when asbestos siding was commonly used. They believe those factors differentiate our support for this application compared to a recent past application for vinyl siding in the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. That was very clear input. Any discussion, comments, questions from the commission?
I was curious, the window that you mentioned you would like to save, I can't tell what the frame is made from.
So, excuse me, there is, I believe on the outside of this window, a very old metal storm window that has been placed on the outside, likely to try and improve the heat characteristics, or the heat holding characteristics of that window. We would not reuse that portion of the storm window, and you can't see the actual wood sill behind it very well from this image, but it is there.
Okay, very good. I wanted to make sure you didn't go out of your way to protect an aluminum window.
I would like to make a motion. I would like to move that we approve based on staff recommendation.
Seconded.
We have a motion and a proper second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes. Is there any other business? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.